On July 4th, 1986, Soviet Air Force Colonel Nikolai Skrytin took off from Begitz Air Force Base in northern Poland in a Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-23, NATO codenamed Flogger B, third-generation jet fighter on a routine training mission. As he took off, the plane's afterburner, used to increase speed, failed. The plane started losing power and altitude, and at just 500 feet, with no altitude to spare, Colonel Skrytin realized that the plane was going to crash and used the plane's ejection system. There's always a risk using an aircraft's ejection system, and more so at low altitude. But the colonel ejected and landed safely, fully expecting that his plane would crash soon after. But it didn't. To the surprise of both pilot and ground crew, the plane recovered, gained altitude, and kept flying. The autopilot keeping it on the last direction set by the pilot, straight towards NATO airspace. The pilotless craft, which did not have any ordnance on board but did have ammunition for its cannons, then crossed over the German Democratic Republic, then part of the Eastern Bloc and allied with the Soviets, and on into the Federal Republic of Germany, NATO airspace, which offered a distinct risk of misunderstanding during the Cold War. As NATO tracked the Soviet warplane, having received no notification from the Soviets, two F-15C Eagle tactical fighter aircraft of the U.S. 32nd Tactical Fighter Squadron of United States Air Forces Europe were scrambled from their base in the Netherlands. Pilots J.D. Martin and Bill Murphy rushed to confront the unknown threat. Despite communication difficulties with the ground, the pilots were able to find the errant MiG, approaching it from behind over West Germany. There they could see that the plane not only carried no ordnance, but, they reported to the startled NATO authorities, it had no crew. The NATO authorities decided that the plane wasn't an immediate risk, but then that left the question what to do with it. If you shoot it down, it caused a risk to civilians below. But the plane's trajectory made it look like it would go over Dutch airspace and then over the North Sea, where it could be safely shot down, and so the two F-15s were ordered to escort the plane until they could shoot it down over the ocean. However, the plane started to bank left, apparently running out of fuel over Dutch airspace. The trajectory suggested it would crash in France, near Lille, just over the border with Belgium. Again, the question was what to do. Would there be more risk shooting the plane down or letting it crash on its own? As they followed the plane, the two F-15 pilots, with the help of ground radar, determined that the plane would likely crash in an empty field in Belgium, and that letting it crash was the safest alternative. Tragically, when the plane finally crashed, it hit a Belgian farmhouse, where an 18-year-old man was trapped under the rubble and died. The pilotless plane had traveled more than 560 miles. The Belgian government lodged an official protest, complaining that the Soviets had offered no warning about the rogue craft. The plane had remained airborne for more than an hour after it showed on NATO radar, with no contact coming from the Soviets, something the Belgian government referred to as notable slowness. When he found out that his errant plane had killed a person, Colonel Skrytin apologized to the family, and the Soviet Union paid Belgium $685,000 in compensation for damages. On February 2nd, 1970, United States Air Force Captain Gary Faust took off in a Convair F-106 Delta Dart interceptor aircraft of the 71st Fighter Interceptor Squadron from Malmstrom Air Force Base near Great Falls, Montana. The plane was on a training mission simulating air combat. At 40,000 feet, the plane and another dropped into what is called a vertical scissor, and during a high-speed rudder roll, went into a flat spin. Captain Faust went through the sequence to recover from a spin, but could not regain control, and ejected at 8,000 feet. To his surprise, after ejecting, the plane went into a nose-down dive and recovered from the spin. The Air Force later theorized that the shift in center of gravity and force from the explosive ejection system had pushed the plane down and allowed it to recover. As he descended in his chute, one of the other pilots radioed to Faust, "You better get back in." Faust landed safely and was rescued by local citizens using snowmobiles. As part of the recovery attempt, the plane had been trimmed for takeoff and set at idle throttle, and now the pilotless plane drifted casually down and landed softly in a wheat field near the small town of Big Sandy, Montana. When the local sheriff arrived, the plane was still idling, and the Air Force instructed him to just let it run out of fuel. The plane was little damaged, so it was recovered and put back into service. The press coined the name the Cornfield Bomber, despite the fact that the plane was not a bomber and did not land in a cornfield. Pilots who later flew the plane called it instead the Gray Ghost. The plane, tail number 787, was finally retired in 1986 and transferred to the Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, where it is on display today. One of the most mysterious examples of a pilotless plane was a B-17 bomber of the Second World War, the so-called ghost ship. On November 21st, 1944, the crew of a British anti-aircraft battery in Belgium witnessed a B-17 bomber making an apparent emergency landing in a potato field near their position. The plane landed roughly enough that it bounced, causing one of the wings to strike the ground and throwing debris from a propeller as the engine was destroyed. But the plane remained upright, with the other engines idling. The gunners rushed to help the crew, only to find the plane mysteriously empty. A logbook mentioned heavy flak, but no damage was apparent. Personal items on board, including partially eaten chocolate, was testament that a crew had recently been on board, but their fate was unknown. Oddest of all, the crew parachutes were still neatly stacked inside. An article appeared in Stars and Stripes magazine the next day, coining the name, The Ghost Ship. Stars and Stripes was able to complete the story in an article published December 8th. The crew had bailed out, and all were recovered safely. The plane had been on a bombing run to a refinery in Meersburg, Germany. The plane's number 2 engine had failed, and the bomber had fallen out from formation. The plane, a nearly new plane on only its 3rd mission, then experienced problems with its bomb racks, and the bombs wouldn't drop. Slow and out of formation, the plane was an easy target, and enemy fire took out the number 3 engine, while hit inside the bomb bay caused a huge flash that made the bombs drop, but miraculously did not make them explode inside the plane. The propeller on number 3 was windmilling, causing vibration. The pilot, Harold Bolt, realized that the plane was not going to make it back to its base in England on 2 engines, and so headed for Belgium, hoping to make it into Allied territory. The crew jettisoned loose equipment to lighten the plane, but as the other 2 engines sputtered and the plane started to lose altitude, DeBolt ordered the crew to bail out. While there were still enemy in the area where they landed, all the crew members were recovered by Belgian civilians and rescued by British infantry. The plane apparently continued to slowly lose altitude, enough to land relatively intact in the field. The crew speculated that the gun crewmen were not able to distinguish the flak damage from landing damage, making it appear as if the plane was undamaged before landing. The parachutes that they found inside were spares. The mysterious story of the ghost ship was again related to the newspaper The Eagle Tribune of North Andover, Massachusetts in 2011 by the co-pilot of the plane, Osborne Stone, who eventually was credited with 40 missions during the Second World War and earned the Air Medal with clusters. He went on to fly again with the Air Force in Korea. Mr. Stone passed away in 2017 at the age of 95. If you enjoyed this History Guy short, then feel free to click that like button, subscribe to our channel, and check us out on Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and our merchandise on teespring.com.